Hi, my name's Fred. I drink beer. Welcome back to Beers from the Basement, where I drag up dusty old bottles from my cellar and we drink them together. I hope you enjoy the show. So, welcome back to Beers from the Basement. I'm calling this week's show Vertically Stoned. And I have a number of beers from the Stone Brewery, and we're going to start off with they're all they're vertical epic. Vertical epic. This one is 040404, which means it was released on May 4th, 2004. And if you're not familiar with these beers, you will see a pattern. So it's diving right in. It's nicely carbonated. Sounds anyway. We'll see. And yeah, there's some. Oops. Yeah, it's fairly well carbonated. It's actually a little darker than I remember, though it is 17 years old. They sort of describe the style as as sort of a saison, a Belgian saison, maybe a super wheat beer, super Belgian wit, or a saison. Lots of interesting stuff on the nose. I'm getting I believe this was made with lime. I'm gonna botch it. The kaffir lime leaves. I'm having trouble today, and I haven't even had a beer. And there's still some of that in the nose. And I'm getting some kind of breadiness and some just general spiciness. Still quite nice. It is a bit oxidized, not unsurprising. And it's been a while since I'm trying to think. I probably had the last one in 2013, maybe, and I'll get to that story in a moment. So it's been a number of years. But it's still drinkable. This was one of my favorite ones back in the day. In fact, I bought a case of it, and I still have probably half of it, so 6 bottles left. So, moving on to the bottle, Stone 040404 Vertical Epic Ale, 8.5% alcohol by volume, brewed and bottled by the Stone Brewing Company, San Marcos, San Diego County, California. And this is the third in the Epic series, and they have the usual kind of Stone verbiage, not quite as in your face as many of the other ones. Naturally re-fermented in the bottle, Indonesian lime leaves and flavored. And flavors such as Thai delights as tom yum and various curries. So I guess this is think about it as a Thai influenced Belgian wit beer, a saison. I'm liking it. It was better. This is one I waited a little too long. It would have been, I think, better, not quite so oxidized. It's still fairly clear. I'm having some technical difficulties, so I don't have a light in front. Not sure what else to tell you now. The Vertical Epic, they actually started it in 2002. They missed 2001. They say they didn't have the idea till halfway through 2001. So the idea was they came out with a beer every year for 11 years. The first one was on February 2nd, so February 2nd, 2002, so 02, 02, and then 03, 03, 03, all the way up to 12, 12, 12. And every year they were different. Some of them, they were all sort of roughly Belgian, say Belgian style or Belgian influenced, all around, say around 8 to 9%. I think there's some 7.5s, and there may have been stronger ones. I don't have them all memorized. But they were, that was kind of a big deal every year when the was coming out. I think I had the 02 and enjoyed it, but they were mostly sold out. Somebody else was sharing it at a bottle share. And then I bought a few of the 03s, and I don't remember specific. I may still have one. I should dig deeper in my basement, because I wouldn't surprise me if I had one of those left. And then I tasted, again, somebody had the 04, and I really liked it, so I bought a case. And I believe I bought a case of the 05 as well. And that's what I'll be drinking next. From that point on, I bought them spottily. I sort of stopped collecting them. So I don't have too many different vertical epics we can do, especially with one person. 22 ounces of 8.5 to 9% beer, that adds up quickly. So we'll see how far I get today. I'm going to pause for a minute, take a picture, and then open up the next one so we have something to compare, and I'll work on my technical difficulty. So we'll see you in a minute. Okay, I'm back with my Stone Brewing Vertical Epic 040404, and I'm still liking this beer. As I said before, it's past its prime. I should have started drinking them a little bit before. It is oxidized, not so much I don't enjoy it, but enough that I can appreciate, and I remember what it once was. So you may see some of these. If I do a 04 theme, definitely include one of these. So I'm going to move along. We'll see how far I get. I'm not promising ahead of time, but I will at least do an 05, 05, 05. Which, as you can tell, came out March 5th, 2005. Now this one, let's see, it's definitely more carbonated. And if I remember, this started off to be a darker beer, and obviously quite a bit. I say this was much like this would have been yellow. The 04 would have been yellow. More yellow in its day, more golden in its day. This was brown to start. And so let's take a whiff. Not getting much, getting some malt and maybe a little bit of spiciness. No, that is nice too. Now, if I remember correctly, and actually I do because I checked, this beer was brewed without spices. It's basically just malt, water, sugar, or malt, water, candy sugar, hops, and Belgian yeast. So it's not quite the Reinheitsgebot because it has sugar, but there are no spices in it. Any spiciness comes from the Belgian yeast. And that's not uncommon. They're known to put off many Belgian yeasts have a phenolic, which sounds like a terrible thing, but it's manifests itself as a clove taste. So if you get that clove flavor, often in a Belgian beer and in a German Hefeweizen, that's a byproduct of the yeast. Um, so this is, I would say it's almost, if you put it to me blind, I might say it was a Belgian double, except for it's a little too chocolatey for that. And it's a little dark. It's almost like a Belgian porter, I guess you'd call it. There is not much oxidation, though that can be hid. The dark malts hide some of that. It's a lot more prevalent in the paler colored beers. I'm gonna do them side by side again. Yeah, I'm liking the 05 a little better just because of the oxidation or lack thereof. So again, 8.5% Stone Vertical Epic 05, 05, 05. Everything else is pretty much the same on the label, other than it's the fourth in the series. This time around, we use no spices in the brewing of this beer. So, anyway, I'm limited release, age at cellar temp or below. Well, cellar temp means something different when you're in Los Angeles than if you are in Iowa or New England or Germany, even UK, even. My basement I haven't talked about it. One of these days I'll get pictures of it. They'll be photoshopped somewhat. But it's live in a townhouse, and it's kind of built into a hill, and so the garage, the back of the garage is the basement, and it's underneath the first floor of the house. So it's below ground, mostly. And I used to have a temperature gauge back there for a while, one of those remote wireless ones, and it stayed pretty constant even in the warmer months. I live close enough to the ocean that we don't get real extremes in temperature. And there's a concrete slab, and a concrete slab does a lot to act as a heat sink, as it were, or a cold sink. So, Stone Vertical Epic. I was and I was not involved in it other than a participant, but a friend of mine who is also a chef and someone I travel with on some of my beer trips decided to do an epic dinner, and he and another guy, they did a 11 course dinner. Each course you had a bottle of that year's Vertical Epic. So you had an 02 on the first course, and they had you had a beer to drink with it, and whatever the appetizer was made with that beer. So any liquid in the recipe. And so we drank them all. People contributed. Originally, that was the price of admission, is you had to bring bottles of one of the beers, and so I brought a few of mine. I'm sure I brought the 4 and 5. I don't remember what else I had, but so the earlier ones you got just a little bit of a sip. The later ones, as more people had collected it, you got a bigger glass. And then at the end, we did a tasting of all 12 of them, 11 of them in a row. We had a 12th beer, and I don't remember what it was. It was some. But it was something related to the series, and I should have looked that up. But it was an epic dinner, and I think that was the first time I used Uber to get home. So that puts it in a time frame, possibly. Well, I'm I have some more of this. I remember at the time I really liked the '04, and I wasn't as much of a fan of the '05, but that's reversed now. Say some of that is age, but so I'm going to pause here for a minute and get a picture and come back, and let's see what happens next. Okay, I'm back with my Stone vertical epics. I've got started off with the '04, which was sort of a Sassoni Belgian style that originally was much more golden, but is oxidized as it's aged. And then I moved on to the '05, which is dark and kind of roasty and no spices, but with the Belgian yeast, so it's got a lot of it's got some spiciness from the yeast. And I don't know how much candy sugar they use. Some Belgian triples you can kind of taste, and maybe you don't actually, but I convinced myself I can taste the candy sugar. Here, if it's masked by the darker malts, but it's dry enough that I would have guessed that it had some kind of sugar in it. They're both quite nice. The 5 is much better though. This is the '04 is kind of in that between stages, and with lighter beers, they sometimes never get to the end stage. But we did in over the years, we've done lots of tastings from multiple years of Belgian beers, places like the Covidtide, where we'll have 8 different years of Chimay Blue, sometimes more. It depends on how many people. We usually get 1 per person, so if we have a group of 8, we get 8. We've also done that with Stille Nacht. That's another beer they have from Dodola Brouwer. It's their Christmas barley wine. Very nice beer, but it's also one that can be aged. And they used to have them going back to, I want to say, 82, maybe 84, back to the early 80s. Now they've sold out of those, or at least they're no longer selling them. With the Covidtide, you never know. They're holding them back for a special thing. But for a while there, you could only get them as part of a vertical. You had to buy a series, and they wouldn't sell them to. The first time I had them, there were a couple of guys from Denmark. We were in town for the Zithos Beer Festival, which was in St. Nicholas at the time, not that far, and they tried to order it, and Lean said, "No, I'm sorry, that's too much beer for 2 people." So we were sitting at the same table, and they kind of, we're standing there and not sitting there, my friend and I, trying not to look like, yes. And they looked over and said, "Are you interested?" And I said, "Oh yeah." So, but anyway, it's very much a bimodal sort of distribution if you studying statistics. The beers will get, sometimes some of these beers are not so good when they're brand new, because the breweries don't do a lot of aging on site. They're bottle conditioned, they outsource the aging to you. So they'll get better and better for a while. And then they kind of plateau, they peak, and then there's a little bit of downward. They say, well, that's not as good, that's not as good, that's not as good. And they'll hit a trough, and then the sherry, so the beer ferments out, and kind of the sherry notes take over, and then it goes back up again. And it's a different beer at that point than the fresh one, because it's a vintage beer, it's an aged beer, and then it'll go for a while, it'll peak, and then it'll drop off again. Now, I haven't had any so old. There may be a third peak when you get to 30 or 40 years. I wouldn't think so, but who knows. So anyway, the whole point of that ramble is the '04 is sort of not yet into the vintage stage, and because it's a pale beer, it may never it may never get there because those just seem to, the oxidation seems more prominent, but you never know. Um, so it might be in a few years this one I'll like it better as it becomes more of a vintage beer. Say right now there's enough of the original flavor left, and the oxidation kind of competes with that, the sherry. Anyway, I'm rambling. That's what I do. So I wasn't going to do this, but you only live once, and I'm coming out of the pandemic, so I do have an 06, 06, 06. And it's like, why not? The 322-ounce bottles of this is still less than 5 bottles of Anchor Bigfoot, or excuse me, Sierra Nevada Bigfoot, or Anchor Christmas. Maybe not Anchor Christmas. So let's see. And actually, to be honest, I don't remember this beer at all. I don't know how many I have. At least 2 bottles of it. It's also dark and very carbonated. And the nose smells much the same. The flavor is quite a bit different. There's not so much the chocolate, and I don't remember what's in this one. I'll have to read the ingredients. It's lighter in body. I'm not really getting any oxidation, and I'm getting some spiciness. This year's edition, you notice a deep, rich aroma of toasty malts, anise, Belgian yeast spiciness, and a hint of cedar. So that's what I'm getting. Body is fairly light for a beer with such high gravity. Guess I didn't check the alcohol. It's 8.66%, so slightly stronger. Okay, there are no spices in it. It's got the same yeast as the 03, and the same as the 05. All the spicy, deep, wonderful, funky aromas come from nothing more than malts, water, and yeast. So the cedar must just be a yeast. Now the anise in the yeast, that tells to me they use the yeast from Head Anchor. Don't know that, but the Guten Carolus, as we say in the States, beers are known for having their yeast is known for having a strong anise flavor. So, be interesting. The 5 and the 6 look very similar. The 6, the 5, and on the aroma, the 5, I'm getting a touch of oxidation, not much, and I didn't get any in the flavor. I don't think I'm getting any in the 6, but not much in the aroma. But the flavor is quite a bit different, and it tastes drier to me. Not as much body, which is surprising. One of the reasons they add sugar to beers is it essentially provides alcohol without providing any body. If you had to get the equivalent alcohol with malt, there would be enough residual sugars that the yeast couldn't digest to give you body in the finish. And sugar, even candy sugar, is pretty much totally fermentable by yeast, or at least enough not to matter. So I'll go through them again. quite in order. I need to. Well, the 5 I think is still my favorite. We'll have to do some further research. This is the 6. Yeah, it's this is more Belgian doubly, if that's a word. As I said, the 5 was more reminded me of a, sort of porter flavors in the roasty malts. Chocolate malt I think is in there, and chocolate malt doesn't mean what you get at the ice cream store. It's malt that's been roasted in such a way that it gives a little bit of a flavor of bitter chocolate, and it also has sort of the color, the dark brown color of chocolate. I think I'm leaning towards the 5 just because I like porters, and I like those roasty notes. The 6 is very nice too, and I'm going to let them sit for a minute and get some pictures and come back and ramble on about them. And I don't really have any Stone stories, or at least not any I want to tell in public. So I will leave it at that, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm back with my Stone Vertical Epics. To recap, I started off with the 040404, which was supposed to be, a stronger saison with, they use sort of Thai lime leaves and some Thai spices in it from my reading. That's gone. When I first tasted it, I got some of the lime, and I may be still getting a little bit. It's faded a little bit. And then I moved along to the 05. Make sure I get the right bottle. That's the 06. They're hard to tell. There's the 05, 05, 05, which I described sort of as like these bottles are in the picture and ruin the focus. Sort of almost like it was a Belgian porter, strong, and it's 8.5%, and Belgian flavors from the Belgian yeast, but a lot of chocolatey, roasty notes in the finish. And then I followed that up with, which is against my better judgment, but hey, you only live once. This is the 060606, and it is also dark, but it's more, it's more like a Belgian double than a porter. I mean, it's again, it's maybe a little dark for a double, but it's closer to that than it would be a porter. Again, from reading the notes, there are no spices in the 5 and 6. The spiciness just comes from the yeast. So the 06, the bottle note said there was anise notes from the yeast, and I'm not getting that, but that's not surprising with again, a 15-year-old beer. And I'm trying to remember. I have the if you gave me a random Belgian beer and it had a strong anise note to it, I would guess it was from Brouwerij Het Anker in Mechelen, the brewers of the Gouden Carolus, lines of beers, and they're all known for having a strong anise flavor from the yeast. So, and I have some older ones of those. So when I crack them, not many, maybe 2, crack them open, we'll see whether they lose that in time. Actually, I have I think a 2003 that I was given as a gift of a Carolus d'Or, and I think I have one or two bottles, large bottles of the Cuvée Van de Kaiser, which is sold in the States as Grand Cru of the Emperor, which to me doesn't ring as well. But I'm biased. Anyway, I'm glad I opened. Right now. I'm glad I opened the third one. Ask me in the morning. Though I do have to stop at this point, not just from the alcohol, as I know I didn't buy the 07. In fact, the 06, I think I only have a few odd bottles, and in fact, this might be the only bottle. I don't know. I don't think I bought a case of it. I think that I really liked the 04, so I bought a case. And the next year I bought the 05 just because, and I remember I didn't like it as much, which is surprising because now it's my favorite. And I probably only bought a couple bottles of the 06, and again, I don't remember specifically, but I don't remember thinking, wow, I really like that beer. So I think that's when I stopped buying the vertical epics. So sadly, that's all there is, unless I come across an 02 buried deep, in which case I could do an 0 or an 03 buried deep. I could do this again. Otherwise, you'll see these beers if I do some year themes, like I do have a bunch of 05 beers and a bunch of 04 beers. So anyway, back to the beers. The 06. It's nice. The alcohol doesn't really come through. I mean, it tastes like a dark Belgian beer that's been well cared for. The 5 is still my favorite. I mean, there's more going on there with the roastiness. Sort of the dark malt, the chocolate malts, and the spiciness from the yeast. So that's still my favorite. And then the 04 is compared to the other three, drinking them in this order, it kind of suffers by comparison with the oxidation. It's still a drinkable, enjoyable beer, but it's not one that, and it's probably one I have most of. So I'll have to start drinking them. But it's my least favorite of the three. But that's not a criticism. It's still a good beer. Well, I think I'm going to leave you at that. Don't have much more else to say. I still have a lot of beer to drink, but you don't need to watch me drink it. I just get sloppy. So as always, if you enjoyed the video, click the like button, click the subscribe button. I'm up to 34 subscribers. That's moving right along. At this rate, I might reach. Well, I won't say you have to. 1,000 is the magic number for YouTube. I don't think I'll make 1,000. But the more it warms my heart when someone hits subscribe. And but hit subscribe, and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell random people on the street, tell your enemies if you really want to bore them. And we'll see what we have. I have not sure what I'm going to have up next. I have a bunch of ideas, and some of it just depends on the whim that hits me. So anyway, thanks for watching. Get your vaccination if you haven't. And good beers to you.